Well, the pizza's a little charred. Got a little carried away, but in my opinion, it is still edible. Would this be too charred for you? But the bottom of the crust is not too charred, so we've got a little bit of damage on the perimeter. But I think, as hungry as I am, it's still edible. Okay. Anyway, I won't claim to be not even a good cook. I won't claim to be a functional human being all the time. What were we even talking? Oh, we're talking about Dylan Mulvaney. Biology, it is real. And now I feel like the pendulum has swung the other way to where we're not supposed to acknowledge that biology has any ramifications on anything, or that it might be significant for anything, or that being born a woman versus a man, it does mean something. And so, what I don't like about certain aspects of the trans movement, and I'm not talking about all trans people, and like I said, I have a number of trans supporters. Uh, what I'm trying to say though is that I support these people, and I support people's right to live how they want, generally speaking, if it's not hurting anyone. But I do not like this idea that this sort of delusional idea that we all have to go along with a kind of delusional thinking that there's no such thing as biology, or that we're not allowed to have basic biological reactions to things. Like I'm small-minded or bigoted if I don't want to date a woman with a penis, or if I don't want to date a woman, or I have sexual preferences. Like, that's bigotry. You see stuff like that now. And so when I look at Dylan Mulvaney, what I would say about Dylan Mulvaney is that, and I have no problem calling her a she, although I don't want to be forced to do that. And I think that's wrong too. And to be forced to verbalize what is really unreality, because she really isn't a woman. But I'll go along with other people's preferences for how they want, to a certain degree, for how they want to be perceived and discussed. But when I look at Dylan Mulvaney, I have no problem with her wearing pearls or wearing makeup or acting in a stereotypically feminine manner, although I personally find it a little annoying, but I find it annoying when women act that way too. A stereotypically feminine manner. But what I do have a problem with, and I have no problem with her calling herself a woman. I'm calling myself Colonel Kurtz, but I'm not a real colonel. And that's where it gets complicated, because if I demand that you all in the audience start thinking of me like someone who's actually attained the rank of colonel in the military and is actually like ordering troops around or something, and then I tell you that you're fucking bigots if you will not concede that reality and you will not talk about me that way or view me that way or whatever, or that the army should let me in. I'm a colonel. I say I'm a colonel, so give me some men and women to order around in the military. It's crazy. And what I don't like about the Dylan Mulvaney thing, or certain aspects of the trans movement, is this idea that it's incorrect for me to view that as a man when it is still obviously a man, or that it is bigoted of me to have opinions on whether I'm looking at a woman or a man, or whether that distinction means anything. I've seen Dylan Mulvaney without the face filters and without the lighting. I'm sure some of you have seen it. There was a picture going around, and it's very clearly a man up close. It's very and I mean it, but I'm saying she's very clearly. It's hard to say she's very clearly a man, actually. But what I'm looking at there, he is very clearly a man. Now, I am fine going along with this vision of how Dylan wants her life to be, and if I were around her, I would call her she, and I'd be happy to, look at her pearl collection or her dress collection or whatever. But like, I'm not going to be forced to say that's a woman. And I know that there are cases, and I find it particularly insulting. Let me say this too. I find it particularly insulting when we're told that we should consider someone a certain sex when they're not even pulling it off very well. It's one thing, like Blair White. Now, I don't know, maybe she's using filters too. I don't know. But Blair White is someone that it seems like if I saw her on the street, I would think that was a woman. Everything about her looks like an authentic woman. I know she's paid a lot of money and gone to a hell of a lot of trouble and discomfort and pain to pull that off. But I feel like she pulls it off. And I've seen people up close who pull it off very well. I was in Thailand, years ago, and I stopped a prostitute to ask for directions, and it was one of the most beautiful. She was one of the most beautiful women that I'd ever seen. And then when she started talking, it was a male voice that came out, but it was like, other than the voice, then I could have fooled me. Pretty much prettier woman than I am. I think that if someone is truly pulling it off well, then sure, it's easier for all of us to go along with it. You know, if someone can pull it off and they're being accepted as a woman, then great. But there are a lot of people, no offense to them, but they're not pulling it off without the filters. And to me, that's even a step deeper into the ridiculousness, because like this is truly like insanity when I'm looking at someone and I'm clearly picking up basic biological signals that they are one sex, and then they're telling me, and society is telling me, or certain woke elements of society are telling me that I am a bigot if I'm responding to these basic signals, or if I'm seeing these basic indicators of what they are. So to me, it's like, what if, okay, look at all these Hollywood stars who are getting plastic surgery and getting Botox and fillers and lasers and all of this stuff, and it's getting to the point where there are a number of people in Hollywood in their 50s who look like they're in their 30s. And as technology becomes more and more advanced, and the kinds of interventions that wealthy people can get become more and more advanced, increasingly we will see that people of a certain financial means will not look who choose to, will not look their age anymore. And I know people can pull it off to greater and lesser degrees, and some people look faker than others or whatever. But I'm saying that the age thing is the same thing. Do you think, what if, let me put it this way, people give Madonna a hard time for having too much plastic surgery, and I agree she went too far. Now, she has the right to do that, right? It's like trans people, but for my taste, it looks strange. What if Madonna took it a step further and she started demanding that we all think of her as a 25-year-old, and that we're bigots if we don't think of her as a 25-year-old? And look, I'm doing all this stuff to be 25. Look at my smooth skin and my plump skin. I don't look like a 25-year-old to you. Well, no, you don't. But even if you did, even if you were pulling it off really well, you still wouldn't be 25, unless we're going to change the definition of 25 to mean something other than actual chronological or actual like numbers, in which case it's not really 25 anymore. It's something else that you've made. So look, there are realities that we all don't like. I don't like the idea of aging. I think I look younger than my age. I'm 42, almost 43. I do a lot of stuff to my skin and whatever to look younger, and I'm very happy when people think I'm younger. But I would never tell you all that you are bigots if you don't think I'm 25, and that's just so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous, and it's that I feel like certain extremist elements of the trans movement, this is what's happening. I'll tell you something else, that I don't like, and I talked about this on Twitter. ESV, the big deal. No, I don't think you're understanding. No one is obligated to watch. That's true. No one is obligated to watch. But watching is one thing. Accepting someone else's distorted version of reality is another, especially when it's being pushed on me. So as you know, it's not just Dylan Mulvaney staying in her lane, so to speak. It is a whole ideology that is in various ways being pushed on people. And you may say, how's it being pushed on you? Well, I taught college for many years, and there were there were times when I was basically forced to go along with this idea, even though I didn't really believe in it. And I had students who wanted me to call them by certain pronouns that just were not indicative of what their biological sex was. So it does actually, after a while, it does sort of start filtering into normal people's experience, or people who are not, are outside of just Dylan Mulvaney. Anyway, I should eat this pizza before it starts getting too cold. But I'll tell you something else that's a little bit irritating to me, and I don't mind it per se, but to me it's kind of symptomatic of something deeper. I went for 40, 35, well, more than that, until I started my YouTube, until a few years ago. I had never had anyone misgender me, and I regularly now, misgender, missex, or whatever, I regularly now have people asking me in YouTube comments, or even on the stream or on the chat or whatever, asking me if I'm trans. Now, and asking me if I'm a boy and telling me that I'm a good looking boy and all of this. Now, I understand that's not indicative of everyone, and maybe there's people who are just kind of strange, but I've gotten this comment enough that there are clearly some people out there who, when they look at me, they're getting some kind of masculine signal. I don't know if it's maybe my bone structure. I don't think I have I mean, I kind of have like a jaw. I guess that's a little more defined. Maybe it's the sort of some of the tomboyish stuff I wear sometimes. Maybe it's the way I carry myself. I don't know. But I frequently now have people asking me if I'm trans, and that would not have happened years ago because there wasn't this confusion that's been introduced now into people's minds. And is that a big deal? Is that a great burden in life? No, it doesn't even particularly bother me, but I'm just saying that these ideologies, they do have profound effects that filter down into society. And the thing with the aging and with movie stars, it's great if movie stars and wealthy people or even normal people like me can because I get mine for free through a family connection. But if people can do things to make themselves feel better about themselves or to feel younger or sexier or whatever, have a better image, great. But the day that I demand that you think that I'm 25 years old or that you relate to me as a 25-year-old, or I'm going to call you a bigot, that's going to be a problem the day that comes. So anyway, that's what I'll say about that. Now, as far as Bud Light, I don't care who Bud Light. I hate alcohol anyway, but I don't care who Bud Light wants to get behind. And so I really don't see the fuss over the Bud Light thing. Like I'm not angry at Bud Light. And even if I liked Bud Light, I wouldn't be angry at Bud Light. I guess the reason why people are angry at Bud Light is because what they said on those cans, the commemorative cans of beer that they gave Dylan Mulvaney, was congratulations on 365 days of being a woman. So I guess what people are angry about is that Bud Light is endorsing this kind of fantasy world that this person is living in, is projecting, and this kind of ideology that's problematic, what I've been talking about. But I really don't get what the big deal is with Bud Light. So that's not my issue, and I don't have an issue with Dylan Mulvaney anyway. I have an issue with aspects of the trans movement and with people and with a certain mentality that I've just described. So anyway, I think that's understandable. I think everybody gets what I'm saying, even if you don't agree with it. I will say this though. Okay, I will say this. My last comment. Human beings, we are increasingly, as technology advances, and it's advancing now exponentially, we are quickly getting to the point where human beings will not be bound by biological destiny, and where we will be able to do all kinds of things to ourselves in terms of physical enhancements, whether we're talking about implants, we're talking about pharmaceuticals or whatever. And like the age interventions that I was talking about, they're getting more and more sophisticated. We are quickly going to get to the point where biological sex will mean less and less, or where it will be more malleable. And the same thing with age and all of these things. And so even though I don't believe that a kind of unreal view of the world should be pushed on people, I do think that we are going to evolve to the point where these distinctions, they won't mean as much, or they will be more malleable. And so that's, I guess, the other thing I would say is that I do recognize that I'm getting to be a middle-aged woman now, and that one of the things that happens when you get to be middle-aged is you look at the younger people and what they're doing and thinking, and you're like, oh, that's crazy. What are they thinking? So I understand that, and I understand that we are moving to a place inexorably where people, one day someone will be able to go into a physician's clinic and say, I'm ready to become a woman. And you'll just if you're a man, and or vice versa, and you'll get to a machine and it'll just go like in Face Off, was it Nicolas Cage or is it John Travolta gets in the machine and then does some stuff and then they've got a brand new face. I do think we'll be there one day. And then your sex will be on some level a matter of pure choice, but we're not there yet. And for people to act like we're there, or we should all be in that headspace, or that a woman with a dick is the same thing as a woman without a dick, I'm not there. And I think it's kind of a crazy making way of thinking. But I respect your opinions, and your experiences if they are different. And I'm open to talking about this more. But I did, I learned a lot of this stuff in grad school. I spent many years in a very, leftist English PhD university program. And, literature is very leftist in general, the field of literature, very leftist, very woke. I read all this stuff about, gender and trans and biology isn't real and all of that. Like I read it all, probably read more than most of the trans people who watch my shows. But I think there was this feeling that a lot of us had that this stuff was just theoretical games that we were playing, and that it wasn't going to actually seep into the culture the way it has. And that's why you should be careful what you teach your kids, or what's passed on to the next generation. And of course, what happened is that all of these kids and all these people learning this stuff, these younger people, and from my generation down, ended up taking it very seriously, or enough of them did. And so now we've got this kind of like woke children of a corn situation, right? Where the younger generations have turned on the parents and become these zealots who are now enforcing some of these frankly borderline delusional, or at least problematic, ways of thinking. And they won't tolerate any form of dissent now. It's like, off with your head, or out to the fields, Malachi, let the corn god get them. Yes, I don't doubt that there are a number of trans people who, because other people feel icky about them or threatened or whatever, that they've been subjected to hate crimes and violence and stuff. But I'm saying that I can support those people, or I can say that stuff is awful, while at the same time also seeing these, I think, significant issues with certain elements of the trans ideology. I don't have a problem with someone dressing how they want to dress, putting on makeup, speaking in a certain stereotypically feminine way, or whatever. But it's when it gets into a kind of delusion where we are all enabling someone to live in an unreality. It's not kind. Let me put it this way. It is not, having seen a picture of Dylan Mulvaney that was not put through a filter, let me just say, it's not kind for people to give Dylan Mulvaney the idea that when she is around someone, they're perceiving her as a woman, that she's passing as a woman. It's just not kind, because it's not true. No one who is around Dylan Mulvaney at any point is really thinking that they're with a woman, or feeling that they're with a woman, interacting with a woman. Now, I understand that there are some trans people who can pull that off, right? Like Blair White or whatever. But I'm just saying that, like, it's important for people to understand reality. And it would be like, I saw the other day, I'll tell you this. I saw the other day, it was a radio show, and I don't know what show it was. I just caught like a little bit of it. But there was a guy, and he was interviewing a couple of women, and one of the women, kind of younger-ish, like she looked like she was in her 20s maybe. One of the women was so stuck on herself, and I can't remember what the plot or the theme or whatever was, but or what they were talking about, but she thought that she was like the hottest thing ever. And she kept saying that I'm a 10. And really, to look at her, you would say, in my opinion, I would say she was like a 6, maybe. She's like, I'm a 10, and she's talking about, like, she treats guys like shit. And of course, this could all be fake, but she treats guys like shit because she knows she's a 10 and all that. And the guy was, and the radio guy interviewing her, he's like, no, you're not a 10. You're not a 10. And she's like, what? Really? Like, you could see, like, it was kind of like no one had told her that, or it was like it was hurting her, or she was disturbed. She was like, and then she starts trying to justify it, like explain like why she thinks she's a 10. And she's like, anyway, for someone to be moving around through life thinking that they are the hottest person that anyone has ever seen, when really they're just kind of like average looking, or maybe sort of ugly, I don't know that it's doing them a great favor for them to be walking around with that false perception, because they're going to be feeling or facing the consequences of the reality, and they're going to be perplexed or unprepared for it if they don't know what reality is. And so, again, like, Dylan Mulvaney, like, is more successful than I'll ever be, apparently, and is millions of followers, raking in the dough. More power to her. It's the shtick or the show or whatever. It's working, clearly. And who am I to say anything? But I also think that it's we shouldn't have to adapt to someone else's unreality. I don't. I understand that it is rudimentary to say man or woman, but also, like, we are rudimentary human beings. Like, classification and these rudimentary ways of seeing the world, like, these are important and significant for us, particularly when there are so many important things that are attached to sex, sexuality, and gender. So I'm not trying to box anyone in to performing a particular gender role. Like there are things that I do and ways I conduct myself that are not stereotypically feminine. I don't want anyone to pressure me to have kids, and I'm not going to, for instance. But at the same time, I think that we have to understand that like these are these feelings and ideas that we have about what a woman is, what a man are, and biological reality, these are not things that you can just take your hand and just like wipe off, you know, like you're clearing a desk or you're clearing a table of something. I don't know. That's my personal. What do you think?
I don't really care until it affects my personal rights.
Mm.
Right? So don't tell me what words I can use and what words I can't use.
Biology, if people just want to wipe all that away and then they're going to turn to the rest of us who we're not there yet, or maybe we're not going to get there, and act like we're the ones who are messed up and we're the bigots, you know. Let's understand this is a tough subject. There is a minority opinion that cannot force itself on the majority, or that itself is a kind of a tyranny. So that's it's a delicate balance. The idea that someone should that I'm a bigot if I do not want to date a woman, or I'm a bigot if I don't want to date a woman who has a penis, like if that kind of weirds me out or whatever. Like that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about with woke, or the idea that children should be deciding that they want to take puberty blockers or getting surgery. Like these are the reaches, the overextensions, and the kind of authoritarianism that I don't think that we like, and just this a delusionalism, like a detachment from reality, to say that there's no reason why someone should have a genital preference. It's great if people don't, but to act like someone is a bigot because they prefer a certain set of genitals or a certain look, sexually speaking, like you're asking people to override deep sexual impulses for the sake of a political agenda or to make you feel better. Well, not you, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh. Yeah, that's just meant to shut down conversation. You're a bigot, conversation ends, okay. You know, or they can't defend their point in another way. Or, like you've said, you know, they went through college, they have this education, they have this kind of brainwashing, you could say, and they actually do think you're a bigot.
I spent too many years in grad school, but let me just say, I started grad school in the mid 2000s. And that was, e-hackers here, so I'm going to wrap this up and continue later. But I started grad school in the mid 2000s, and that was when a lot of this woke, for lack of a better word, and I know it's an annoying word, but it's shorthand. You all know what I mean when I say it. This woke theoretical stuff, when it was really becoming very, very powerful in academia, and when it was being taught very enthusiastically and very widely. So, for instance, one of the basic texts, if you're taking a class that is in any way oriented toward gender, or at least when I was, one of the basic texts is Gender Trouble by Judith Butler. And this is considered a seminal foundational text in like the idea of like that there is no such thing as sex, or gender is different from sex, and even sort of early, you know, trans studies. So my point is, I saw a lot of this coming down the pike, and my thinking, and I think the thinking of a lot of people who were teaching this stuff, is that, oh, this is cool theoretical stuff, but people are not going to like really ever take this seriously. You know, it's like one of those things like, yeah, I didn't agree with all of it philosophically, and I thought it was too woke. We didn't have that word back then, but I thought it was too woke, and I thought that it was oppressively leftist, and way too, everything was way from the left, politically speaking, and all of that in grad school and in my literature PhD program and in some of the classes. But there was also this feeling of like, well, look, I knew when I came to school in a graduate program, a PhD program, I knew that it was going to be from this particular slant. And look, I'm going to learn some stuff and I'm just going to experiment, you know? So yeah, I'll experiment with this idea. Like, yeah, you're right. We could say maybe that there is no such thing as a woman. I mean, when you think about it, really, or that gender could be completely detached from sex, biological sex. Okay. And so you kind of play with ideas and you read some cool stuff and it gives you a different perspective that you're glad you have. But like, I had no idea. Bottom line, what I'm trying to say is that years and years ago, when I was studying this stuff in grad school and when it was becoming really strong in the academy and being widely taught, I think there was this idea of like, oh, we're doing cool, like, or they're giving me kind of just interesting theoretical stuff, and we're going to fuck around with these ideas and whatever, but like we don't really believe this, and we're not really going to live this way. This isn't going to really dictate like actual policy or like who Bud Light is going to partner with and things like that. Like, and so what happened was is that all of this stuff got taught in the schools, and people actually listened to it. And you had all of these young people. I know I'm oversimplifying, but to a degree, what happened was you had all of these young people who went through this kind of schooling and sort of indoctrination, and also apparently it's happening, you know, in high schools and lower than that. But they go through this, and then that is their perspective, a number of them on the world, and then they become successful, and they become the director of PR for Bud Lights or what have you, and then they want to implement their vision. You know, I just never thought this stuff would get taken. I guess what I'm saying is when I was learning some of this stuff as a graduate student, I just never thought it would get taken that seriously or be as widely as applied as it has been. And I have, to sound like a cliche, but I have some trans friends. I have nothing, a lot of trans people in my audience. I don't have anything against trans people or about or against people who want to experiment with gender or be who they want to be. That's not what this is about. This is about a certain ideology that I think is being pushed on us and is being used at times to obscure truths that certain people don't want to acknowledge.